Something I think worth thinking about is the role leadership plays in the establishment of the current political order and the social effects that stem from that particular order. I think many people would agree that there are certain social issues or social problems that stem from the political organization or the social arrangement that currently exists. And this frame of mind, this frame of thinking came from when I was trying to understand and reflecting on media critique, right? And I realized that the media critics, particularly the formal ones, right? They have got serious problems in terms of philosophical failures. I think they're operating from a failed meta-ethics, a failed epistemology, and a failed aesthetics. And I think they're also working with a decayed value system, particularly since they're operating within a culture of counterculture, and there's a section of the population that is dealing with general anxiety, anomie, anger, and alienation. So while I intend to make a video on this point, I thought that leadership into decay would be more interesting to make a video about, and might help warn us to stay away from certain errors and certain mistakes, and might maybe trigger our thinking into operating in a manner that would help our brothers and sisters, the people around us, that we may be able to be more productive socially and end up building a community and a society that would be beautiful and meaningful for everyone involved. Well, first I'd just like to borrow from the traditional school of thought when they divided society into 4 classes or 4 castes. Right? And while there are different formulations of it in various traditions, I think that it's a nice frame to use to describe what the different cogs within the community are trying to accomplish, and also to describe how these classes have been co-opted in the current regime that pushes them to operate into malfunction, and that malfunction can be a source of the problems that we discern or we're able to see. I think the power of the priestly class comes from influence. And I think the role of the priest is to be custodians of the animating spirit of the people. They orient the people towards ultimate concern. They're the ones who have the job of discerning reason, being, goodness, truth, and beauty. All right? They're the ones who keep and they collect the wisdom and the traditions of the community. They're the ones that mediate culture with logos, right? They connect the public with the spiritual, the moral, right? The legal. They're the ones who define these things. In doing so, they protect the people and they unify the people, right? And protection from spiritual threats, right? And arbitrate the social conflicts that emerge by being intelligent, rational, and sociable, right? And I think the problem in our regime is that the priestly class has been replaced by natural philosophers, right? And the pursuit of the kingdom of God has been replaced with economic growth, right? And you see the role that the clerics of the church are supposed to play is being played by what I describe as the priests of Mammon, right? And we also have a warrior class whose power comes from might. And it's said that they're the custodians of the military and the martial spirit of a people, right? They're the ones who are supposed to embody and nurture valor to allow them to deal with physical threats, right? They're charged to use violence justly and wisely, right? And you find in this regime, they've been oriented away from the kingdom of God towards protecting economic interests, right? And rather than having martial leaders, we end up having managers. And when it's purely about the economics of a thing, you find that you replace your knights who are warriors of a higher ideal, right? Who look to embody a certain tradition, right? Or a certain martial spirit. They end up being reduced into mercenaries, right? And then in this regime that they've been given monopoly on violence, but then they've been tied to the servants and the priests of Mammon. And there's what people would call the peasants, but I think I should call them the producer class. And I think their power comes from resources, right? Production of resources. And I think they're the custodians of the productive capacity of a people, right? They're the ones who draw from creation to produce that which is needed, right? And they are the ones charged with meeting material needs, right? And in this regime, the problem is that they have now been enslaved into building a monument to Mammon, right? And then their productive capacity is being expended purely for accumulation of their fruit at the feet of the regime, right? Which I think you can start picking out some of the dysfunctions that could stem from this appropriation of role and redirecting it to a more niche purpose, right? And I would like to posit that there will be a merchant class, right? Most people will put like traders or rather people put the merchants and the peasants into like one category, but I think they should be separated into two different categories, because I think the merchant class are the ones who facilitate exchange between people, right? They're the ones who mediate the different productive capacities in order to meet wants and needs, right? And in doing so, they end up extending the productive capacity of a people, right? Usually being drained from another set of people. And unfortunately, in this regime, some are appointing them to be arbiters of the spiritual, right? And we end up having the market being treated as if the market is logos. And when I'm talking about logos, I'm talking about the natural order, right? Or rather, should I say the order that governs reality, right? That which defines the real and the interaction of properties, right? And you notice this framework of these four classes cooperating and working in service of each other, it ends up creating an environment of fruitfulness, right? Where the upper layer provides the environment for the flourishing of the lower layers, and the lower layers provide the resources for the thriving of the upper layers, right? But then when you have the degradation of these classes, it now makes people vulnerable for attacks, right? And depending on the weakness of each class and with the level of decay and corruption, a perverted form of the class emerges, right? And then this perverted form of the class produces a perverted form of leadership that kills the environment for fruitfulness. And so I would like to pivot to the idea of class degradation, right? And so I would like to argue that this results in class degradation, which I should explore in the second part of the video, not to make it too long.